I learned that betrayal didn't smell like cologne. It smelled like eucalyptus oil, incense, and a warm room where people pretended sweat was the same as truth. The studio was packed, mats lined in perfect rows. The mirrors made the space look twice as full, like the lies had brought their reflections to cheer. Music drifted from a speaker, soft bells over a low hum that told everyone to breathe and forget. I stood at the back by the shoe racks, a teacher's ID still clipped to my belt from school. My town was small. People recognized me. They nodded, nice and careful, the way people greet a man they think is about to be broken. I kept my face calm. Calm is a kind of armor. When people expect thunder and you give them sky, they don't know where to aim. She was in the middle, where she always wanted to be. Elena, ponytail high, leggings like paint, the color of sunset fruit. She fit the center like a crown fits a head that asked for it. Her mat was a little brighter than the rest, so you could not forget where to look. And then there was him, Raphael. Barefoot, smooth voice, shoulders rolled back like he was leading a parade. He moved through the rows with one hand raised, not touching, not quite. When he reached Elena, the hand did touch, a soft press at the small of her back. He adjusted her posture and she tilted toward his palm as if gravity lived there. The room called it guidance. My stomach called it ownership. "One more breath," he said. "Open your heart to the universe." He said it like the universe was spelled R-A-F-A-E-L. I watched. I did not interrupt. There are times to argue and times to collect. I had been collecting for weeks. The late-night retreat planning calls that went long and ended on a small laugh. The credit card charges to his small LLC, named after a river that did not exist. The hotel receipt tucked in her bag under a grocery list. The hotel was an hour away. No workshops were scheduled there. My lawyer smiled softly when I showed him. "Slow," he said. "Slow buys you two things, proof and peace." Halfway through class, the heat rose and the windows fogged. My shirt stuck to my back. The mirrors carried the image of my face a dozen times. I kept the same simple look on each one, the kind you wear when you already know the ending. Raphael led the last flow like he was conducting a choir. The final pose was a long stretch with all eyes up front. Elena glanced at me then, just a flicker, then passed me to her reflection. It was the kind of glance a person gives a life they plan to set down on the curb with a free sign. When class ended, bodies sat cross-legged, hands pressed, voices low. Raphael bowed dramatically. Before anyone could roll a mat, Elena stood. "Everyone," she said, breath high, cheeks bright. "I just want to thank this man." She placed her hand on Raphael's chest with the stage confidence of a person who had practiced the line in a mirror. "He has transformed my body and my life." Silence snapped to attention. She smiled wider and added, "In more ways than one." Gasps. A single whistle. Laughter that tried to be kind and failed. Heads turned toward me as if a camera had swung on a boom. I saw the pity line start to draw across the room. People brace for collapse the way they watch a tower of blocks wobble. They want the crash they can later describe. My heart did not crack. It clicked. It clicked like a door that had been left on its latch for weeks and finally swung open. I stepped forward, slow and unbothered. "I'm glad you found what you were looking for," I said, plain voice, even breath. I did not look at the hand on his chest. I looked at her eyes. She expected rage or tears. She expected a scene. I gave her a note card instead. Her smile shook, only a little, but enough that the mirror caught it. Raphael shifted his weight and let his shoulders widen, the animal trick of looking bigger. "Some people hold others back from their true potential," he said, low, almost kind, but pointed like a stick. "She helps me reach mine," Elena added, eyes glossy with victory. People clapped for them, not everyone, but enough. I nodded once at the room, a teacher excusing a class after a test. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll stay out of the way." Calm is terrifying when a storm was expected. A woman near the water cooler whispered, damn, and stared at me like I had grown the wrong face. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Right on time. My lawyer's message lit the screen. Certified letters out for 8 a.m. I checked my watch. 48 hours, I said under my breath, not to them, to the clock I had set months ago. 2 days until the filings were served. 2 days until the letters with my lawyer's letterhead touched their fingers and did not let go. The class began to spill. Mats rolled. Bottles clicked. The smell of eucalyptus swelled and sank. Elena walked toward me with a soft smile that people use when they think they are being gracious in their cruelty. "You took that well," she said. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I can't live small to keep you comfortable." I let the words pass like a car in the next lane. "I'm a teacher," I said. "I know how to keep lessons until the very end." She laughed, high, like wind chimes. "We'll talk later. Raphael and I have plans." She said plans, like a holiday. "I know," I said. Her smile dropped a centimeter. "What do you mean?" "You'll find out soon." Raphael stepped in. He smelled like soap and success. "She's moving on, man. Let her be happy." "I can't wait to see her happy," I said. His eyebrows folded, then smoothed. He did not like puzzles he had not chosen. "You think a piece of paper scares me?" he asked, voice too loud for the quiet he wanted to control. "No," I said, walking past him. "The fine print does." I picked up my coat. I nodded at the front desk girl who tried to smile but couldn't choose which side of her mouth to use. Outside, the evening air was cool and clean. The sky still held a little light, the kind that makes roofs look taller and power lines look like staff lines on a song no one finished. I stood on the sidewalk and let my breath bridge the heat of the studio and the chill of the street. The door opened behind me. Someone said my name. I did not turn. The street had decided which way I would walk weeks ago. At home, I set my phone on the table and opened the folder I kept in the bottom drawer. Each tab held a month. Each month held the small, boring proofs that make big mistakes undeniable. Retreat fees routed through a business account that had only 2 clients and 1 address. Hotel charges on nights she was supposed to be resetting. Messages saved with timestamps that lined up with locations. Photos of the Wellness Weekend flyer with Raphael's face in a halo of green leaves, and in tiny letters at the bottom, the legal name of his LLC. I had circled it with a red pen like a teacher grades a lie. I did not hate her. I hated the story she chose, the one where she was the brave hero who escaped the dull teacher with the steady life, the one where a bendable man with a soft voice woke her true self while holding out a basket for money. I hated that I had once accepted crumbs and called it dinner. A good thing about teaching is you learn how to set rubrics. You learn how to say, no, that is not enough. The plan was simple because simple is strong. Day 1. Serve the divorce, the temporary orders, the notice to freeze the joint account she had been quietly draining by small auto transfers she thought I wouldn't notice. Serve the studio with a cease and desist for using my image on their community board, where I was the supportive husband, in a photo I had not agreed to take. Serve Raphael with a letter about tortious interference, about professional boundaries, about basic lines you do not cross unless you want a judge to learn your name. Day 2, file the complaint with the state licensing board for his yoga teacher certification group. It wasn't strong by itself, but the letters and the photos would make it stand. The board did not like stories that smelled like this. In the mirror that night, I looked like myself. Not the version that begged, the version that wrote. I thought of my students, the ones who slow their breath when they realize the answer is in the question they almost skipped. I had almost skipped the question of me. What do I deserve? The answer came simple: peace and room. The next morning, the sun climbed the same way it always did, slow and sure. I drank coffee on the porch and watched a mail truck turn onto our street at exactly 8:06. The driver moved with the small pride of a person who knows their route like a poem. He stopped at my box first, a thin envelope. I opened it. my lawyer's copy. Then he crossed the street and slid 2 thick white letters into the black slot at the studio door. I could see the glass. I could see the desk. I could imagine the girl's hand when she picked them up. I checked my watch. Elena would be there in an hour for her private session. Raphael liked mornings. "Start your day with fire," his flyer said. My hands were steady on the cup. The steam rose like a flag from a country I had chosen. I sent one text to a number that never asked questions. "Served." A single-word reply flashed back. "Breathe." I did. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow. The air tasted like rain on old wood. By noon, my phone lit with messages, not from her, from others. One from a parent at school. "Thinking of you." One from a friend who lifted weights and small towns. "You good?" I wrote the same reply to everyone. "I'm fine, thank you." Calm answers hold doors shut. At 2, her name lit my screen. I let it buzz out. At 2:03, another call. At 2:05, a text. "What is this?" No punctuation. At 2:10, "We need to talk." At 2:12, "You are overreacting." At 2:15, "You are ruining my life." At 2:17, silence. I set the phone down and looked out the window. A cloud moved. A bird cut a thin line across the light. I thought of a line my students wrote on a poster once. "We are not what we feel in one loud minute." I smiled. Then I wrote a line to myself and spoke it to the empty room. I was never the victim. I was the planner. The words sat like a stone in a river. The water went around it. The stone did not move. At 5, I walked past the studio on my way to buy bread. The door was propped open. The desk girl avoided my eyes. I did not look in. I did not need to. My letters were doing their work in a room that used to smell like eucalyptus and lies. The paper did not shake. Paper never does. By evening, the town knew. Small towns pass news like a casserole dish. You return it clean, or you don't get another. I sat at my table with the bread and soup and ate slowly. Food tasted like food again. The house felt wider. The clock ticked the same way. It sounded kinder. Before I slept, I stood in the doorway, looked at the street, and said one sentence to the quiet. "Tomorrow is the first real day." Then I went to bed. My breath stayed even. My hands did not tremble. Somewhere across town, someone unfolded a letter and discovered the difference between a retreat and a retreat that runs into the law. Calm won the night. The first morning after the letters were served didn't begin with thunder or dread. It began with quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a house sighing in relief. The sunlight pushed through the blinds in long, soft shapes, marking the end of the life I lived in the dark. My alarm hadn't even buzzed yet, but my body knew today mattered. The coffee machine hummed as beans cracked and heat rose, and that familiar bitter smell settled into the kitchen. I stood barefoot on the cool tile and let the steam warm my face. Everything felt crisp, like justice had opened the windows overnight. Elena would be at the studio around 7:30 a.m. for her private session. Raphael didn't start shouting inspirational nonsense until 8. She would open the studio door, greet the desk girl with a bright namaste, and then her bag would chime with a new message. Certified mail. Her name printed in sharp, undeniable ink. A letter thick with documents that couldn't be explained away with yoga philosophy. I raised my mug slightly toward the empty breakfast table. A silent toast. To truth and the paper it prints on. Right on cue, at exactly 8:04 a.m., my phone lit up with shaking urgency. 11 missed calls. Elena. A text followed, full of panic she didn't bother to spell check. "What is this? Why would you do this?" A part of me, the old version, would have rushed to comfort her or explain myself. But that version had been locked out of my life the day she let another man's hands correct her posture. I let the phone buzz on the table like a trapped insect. Another message arrived. You can't be serious. This is insane. Call me now. Control isn't loud. Control is choosing when to respond. I wrote, later. Short responses scare people who expect paragraphs. At school, everything smelled like pencil shavings, warm dust, and floor wax, the ordinary perfume of life going right. The bell rang, lockers slammed, and students bubbled through hallways with energy I wished I could bottle. My co-teacher, Emily, leaned against the classroom door holding a stack of essays. Her eyes narrowed. "You're very calm," she said slowly. Too calm for someone whose wife just detonated a bomb in public. Small town, fast gossip. "Chaos doesn't own me," I replied, sliding papers into neat piles. She studied me for another second, then nodded. "Good. Don't let it write your story." It was comforting to be around someone who didn't treat me like a headline. During first period, I stood in front of the class explaining literary mood, while inside my head, the narrative of Elena's morning played like a movie. I pictured her in Raphael's studio office, her angry finger jabbing the letter as she demanded answers no one could give her. I pictured Raphael pretending confidence, while his heartbeat hammered out a very different rhythm. There is a metaphor for this, I told the class. Power is like a door. You only notice it when someone closes it. They took notes. I smiled. At lunch, I sat outside on the courtyard bench, watching sunlight glitter through the chain-link fence. My phone vibrated again, this time my lawyer. Blake, Mahoney & Blake Law. Instructor called. He's upset and confused. Good. I could almost hear his calm grin. He asked if you were bluffing. I tapped a slow reply. Let him find out. His next message came immediately. Everything is filed. Judges don't like adulterous yoga gurus. I laughed out loud, a sound that surprised even me. Laughter usually needs joy. I suppose this counted. I typed, "What's next?" His answer, "Tomorrow, financial disclosures, plus official summons of dissolution. Today, watch them panic." Excellent legal advice. The last bell rang at 3 p.m. Students scattered, backpacks bouncing behind them like parachutes. As I walked through the parking lot, keys in hand, a familiar blue SUV was parked beside my car. Elena. She clung to the door, arms folded over her chest as if hugging herself was protection enough. She charged toward me before I could fully exhale. "You served me divorce papers?" Her voice cracked into the open air, loud enough for a flock of geese overhead to change direction. I didn't flinch, didn't quicken my feet, didn't apologize. "Yes," I answered. "Why?" she demanded. "Why won't you talk to me? We could have fixed us." "You didn't want to fix us," I said. "You wanted to switch us out." Her breath hitched. "It was just a yoga retreat and I was confused." "You were horizontal," I corrected softly, "not confused." A sharp gasp from her ego. "You're ruining my life over a harmless mistake." She grabbed my arm, nails digging, desperation replacing pride. "I still love you," she whispered. The saddest part? She thought that mattered after everything. "You loved attention more," I said. "You loved applause. You loved being the center, even if you had to push me off the map to get there." Her eyes filled fast, too fast, tears she could summon like faucets, not for heartbreak, for loss of power. "We can go to therapy," she pleaded. "You like therapy?" "Therapy helps two people who want the same future," I replied. "You chose yours already. I'm just finalizing the paperwork." She looked stunned. She had expected me to crumble, not to conclude. Her voice dropped into a trembling whisper. "You planned this. You planned every piece." "Yes," I said, "while you were busy finding balance on someone else." She stepped back, breathing too fast, mascara struggling to stay loyal. Her voice came out broken. "This isn't you." I shook my head slowly. "No, Elena. This is exactly me. the part you didn't think mattered. And then I gave her a line she would replay in her own silence later. I'm not punishing you for leaving me. I'm protecting myself from letting you stay. Something collapsed in her posture, a puppet whose strings were just cut. She stumbled toward her SUV, wiping her face so fast the tears streaked like watercolor. Didn't start the car right away. Just sat there, breathing like the mirror finally showed her what she looked like. I didn't chase. I opened my door, turned on the radio, and let the quiet music fold around me. My phone buzzed on the seat. Blake again. Studio's merchant account frozen. That should hurt him. More tomorrow. I texted back. Perfect. The car's AC whispered cool air over my face. A breeze tickled through the cracked window. Everything in my body was still, not numb, not angry, just correct. I had a thought then, simple and clean. Revenge isn't rage. Revenge is order. I drove home without looking in the mirror. That evening, dinner was a sandwich eaten slowly while the sunset slid orange into purple beyond the window. The world didn't demand anything. It just existed, and I existed with it, fully, calmly. Before bed, I stood on the front porch and looked down the street, kids riding bikes, neighbors laughing, sprinklers clicking in rhythm. Life moved on, gently stepping around my personal earthquake. I whispered to myself, quiet, certain. Day one done. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, boards, and the sudden collapse of two people who thought they were climbing toward enlightenment. Tonight, peace was enough. The next morning tried its best to feel normal. Birds chirped irresponsibly loud like they weren't aware of the legal chaos unfolding across town. I brewed coffee again, dark, bold, the drink of someone who planned his own justice. I sat on the porch, the mug warming my hands while cool air held the rest of me steady. My phone buzzed at 7:11 a.m. Not Elena this time. Studio owner, unknown number. Hello? I answered, voice calm as the steam from my cup. A sharp inhale crackled through the line. Is this Aaron? Yes, I said. Who's calling? I'm Megan. I own Spirit Pulse Yoga. I received a notice this morning from your lawyer. Something about legal interference and misconduct. Correct, I replied. It's addressed to one of your instructors. Look, she started, voice trembling between anger and professionalism. I had no idea he was involved with a married client. We have policies. We do. If I had known... You know now, I said, interrupting softly. She exhaled, a tight breath. We'll be suspending him pending review, but, could we discuss this in person? I'd like to understand the full situation. Of course, I said. I'll stop by this afternoon. She paused. Thank you for handling this rationally. Rational. A word people use when they expect fire and get ice instead. School grounded me again. Kids learning, laughing, forgetting life is complicated. I envied their simplicity sometimes. But simplicity never saved anyone from a cheating spouse. Right before lunch, Blake texted, Summons served, financial disclosure demanded, temporary orders hearing scheduled. Translation. The judge now owned a piece of Elena's panic. A minute later, pulling Raphael's certification file today, licensing board notified. Translation. His new spiritual journey may involve paperwork and panic attacks. I tucked the phone away. Step by step, the plan tightened its grip. By 3 p.m., I stood in front of Spirit Pulse Yoga. The building's glass windows reflected the world like it didn't want anyone to look too closely. A Find Your Inner Fire poster with Raphael's smiling face hung slightly crooked. Poetic, really. Inside, Megan waited behind the check-in desk, hands folded like she was ready for prayer or a fight. Tough to tell. Aaron, right? She asked gently. Yes. I nodded. She motioned to her office. I followed the smell of lavender and fear. She shut the door. First, I'm sorry. For everything. Not your fault, I said, sitting. You trusted the wrong employee. Her lips thinned. He told us he was mentoring her, helping her through emotional realignment. That's the phrase he used. I nodded slowly. My marriage was the thing he realigned. Megan rubbed her forehead. I swear I didn't know. And if what the letters say is true, this is serious. He crossed lines. Harmed you. Harmed our studio reputation. We can't ignore that. I studied her. She wasn't performing outrage. She was drowning in it. We want to cooperate fully, she continued. If you're willing, we can provide scheduling logs, payment details tied to private lessons, and anything else needed. I smiled. That would help. She leaned forward. I built this place to help people heal, not to let predators hide behind yoga mats. There it was. Accountability. Rare, refreshing. I appreciate that, I told her. And I meant it. When I stood to leave, she said softly, if you ever need a safe place to just breathe, you're welcome here. Free of charge. I chuckled. Maybe someday. Maybe, but definitely not while Raphael's sweat still stained the floors. Outside, I walked toward my car, only to find Raphael leaning against the driver's side window, arms crossed like a defensive statue. His jaw worked overtime, grinding fury into dust. He pushed off the car and stepped directly into my path. You think you're clever? He hissed. You think you can ruin me because your wife finally realized what she wants? What she wants. As if Elena was a prize he'd won in a raffle. I didn't ruin you, I said. You built your own collapse. I just added lighting and a sign so everyone could see it. His nostrils flared. Stop this. You don't want a war with me. War? I repeated, tilting my head. You already lost the first battle, Raphael. You just didn't read the results. He stepped closer, heat radiating off him. I'm not scared of paperwork. No, I agreed. You're scared of consequences. His fists clenched. You have no idea who you're messing with. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who will lose his job, his license, and his following because he couldn't keep boundaries with a married woman. His face twisted. She came to me. She wanted me. And she can want anyone she likes, I said, except my money and my insurance benefits. Those stay with me. He blinked, speech stalling, the financial angle hitting harder than the moral one ever could. You can walk away now, I said, and salvage what's left of your future. Or you can keep trying to flex your ego until the law finishes breaking it. For a second, I thought he might swing, but cowardice kept his arms stiff and useless. He spat on the ground, so dramatic, and stormed off across the lot, straight into a puddle left by last night's rain. His shoe made a loud squelch. He cursed. I smiled, tiny, quiet. Poetic previews come in many forms. On the drive home, my phone rang. Elena again. I let it ring. Then a voicemail. Her voice splintering under its own weight. Please call me. I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. Fear. A tool she sharpened often, now cutting her instead. When I got home, I placed my phone face down and sat at the kitchen table. Dinner was leftover pasta. I ate slowly, letting the world shift into a new balance. Later, as dusk smoothed the edges of the day, I stepped outside. Crickets chirped. A porch light flickered down the street. Life continued without apology. I leaned against the railing and breathed. In, out, the way therapists teach. Except this time, the breath wasn't for panic. It was for victory, unfolding patiently. Revenge didn't require shouting. It required signatures. Control didn't require fists. It required time. When the moon climbed high and the neighborhood fell into sleep, I whispered a thought into the cool air. Tomorrow, the judge hears everything. The stars above looked like witnesses, silent, bright, on my side. And somewhere in a dark studio office, two people finally understood something important. I hadn't just caught them. I had prepared for them. Day 2 was complete. Day 3 would bring the consequences they pretended couldn't touch them. Sleep felt like a friend returning home. The courthouse in our town wasn't grand or intimidating. It looked like a library that accidentally swallowed a judge. Brick walls, flag out front, a parking lot full of minivans. People came here for marriage licenses more often than justice. But today, justice had a reserved seat. I parked a block away to give myself a quiet walk. The morning was cold, the kind of cold that keeps you alert. I watched my breath fog slightly with each step, like my body marking progress toward something important. The courthouse doors reflected the sunlight like a truth too bright to look at without blinking. Inside, the air smelled like old papers and new nerves. Lawyers walked fast with their eyes focused forward, people who didn't need to rehearse their authority. I found Blake, my lawyer, in the hallway outside courtroom B, reading through a thin stack of documents as if they were a menu he needed to memorize. He glanced up when he heard me. "You look calm," he noted. "Good. Calm looks like credibility." "Calm is the only thing I practiced," I replied. He handed me one sheet. "Temporary orders hearing. We're asking for immediate financial protection and full access to shared records. The judge already saw our initial packet. He has questions." "Good ones?" I asked. "The kind that make your wife wish she'd chosen pottery, not yoga," he muttered. We sat on the wooden bench while the previous case concluded, a custody dispute with raised voices and a judge who looked like he needed a week-long nap already. Then, "Thompson versus Thompson." The bailiff's voice echoed like a door unlocking. Elena stood up 2 rows down. Her hair wasn't styled like usual. Her makeup was lighter, less goddess on a mountaintop, more human caught in headlights. She saw me. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, then tried to soften. She wasn't sure which version of herself would work on me anymore. Raphael wasn't there. Small victories are still victories. Inside the courtroom, the judge looked like a man who hated nonsense more than lies. Gray beard, tired eyes, but posture like a ruler. We stood at separate tables, distance enforced by more than furniture. Blake introduced the case. "Your Honor, we're requesting temporary protective orders regarding finances and sanctions for marital misconduct affecting assets. Simple, clear, lethal." The judge flipped pages, adjusting his glasses. He addressed me first. "Mr. Thompson, your filings include claims of infidelity, financial deception, and interference by a third party. Is all this accurate to the best of your knowledge?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, hands steady on the table, "and supported by documented evidence." I didn't look at Elena. I looked at the judge, the person who could turn pain into law. Elena's attorney, a man named Silas, stood like a vulture dressed in a suit 2 sizes too smug. "Your Honor, this is all an overreaction," Silas began. "There was no malicious financial behavior, no transfer of funds with intent to harm. It was a misunderstanding in their marriage, one that should be resolved privately with counseling." Ah, counseling. The bandage people recommend for bullet wounds. The judge turned to Elena. "Mrs. Thompson, did you authorize or participate in private retreats with the instructor named in these documents during the marriage using marital funds?" Elena swallowed. Her throat moved like she was trying to force down a stone. "I attended self-development retreats," she said carefully. "But nothing," Blake cut in smoothly. "May I present Exhibit A?" He raised his hand and a clerk retrieved a folder. Receipts, screenshots, time-stamped photos, and 1 hotel invoice with 1 bed and 2 guests listed on record. Silas jumped in. "This doesn't prove—" The judge held up a hand. Silence landed like a gavel. Then the judge asked the question I knew would change everything. "Mrs. Thompson, is the name Spirit Pulse Yoga LLC tied to this instructor?" "Yes," she admitted. And are these your signatures authorizing payments to him from your joint bank account? The judge pressed, holding out the documents. Elena stared at the pages. Her voice thinned to a whisper. Yes. Her attorney grimaced. The judge nodded slowly. You understand that when marital funds are used to facilitate a relationship outside the marriage, the court views that as marital waste and may sanction restitution? Elena blinked fast, breathing tight. She hadn't prepared for legal vocabulary. Yes, she whispered. No need to whisper, the judge said. Truth is loud in this room. I almost smiled. Almost. Blake stepped forward. We request a freeze on joint funds to prevent further withdrawals, immediate financial accounting, and temporary exclusive control for my client during proceedings. Silas stood. Your Honor, that's extreme. It's appropriate, the judge said, cutting him off. Granted. A single word. Granted. The oxygen shifted. Elena closed her eyes like she'd felt a punch. Then, we will also set a hearing regarding fault in asset division once records are complete, the judge added. Mrs. Thompson, you are ordered to provide full financial disclosure within 7 days. 7 days to reveal every secret transfer. Her shoulders slumped, hands clenched around tissues. A tear escaped, but she wiped it fast, not wanting to look weak in front of power. Silas leaned in, whispering something into her ear. She nodded, stiffly, but her lips were pale. The judge finished with a final blow. And given the involvement of a third party, the court reserves the right to hear testimony regarding potential exploitation by said party. Contact with that person should be limited until further notice. Elena gasped. Raphael had just been legally benched. Court adjourned. The gavel tapped once, sharp, final. Outside the courtroom, Elena approached me, slow and trembling, like someone walking on glass. You're turning everyone against me, she said, voice small. No, I answered. You did that. I'm just not covering for you anymore. I didn't think you had this in you, she stuttered. That sentence lingered between us. The truth of her biggest mistake. You didn't think, I corrected. And that's why we're here. Her eyes brimmed again. I miss who we were. I miss who we could have been, I replied. But you chose who we wouldn't be. For a second, she looked at my chest, not my face, like she was searching for the old version of me she could manipulate. But he was gone. Blake stepped beside me. Mr. Thompson, we need to get copies of the orders filed. Elena's voice lifted, desperate. Aaron, please. Can we talk privately? I looked her straight in the eyes. No, from now on everything goes through our lawyers. Her face folded inward. That's the thing about boundaries. Cheaters hate them. I walked away before she could craft another emotional monologue. In the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I let silence be the applause I never got. The steering wheel felt smooth beneath my hands, a small anchor in a storm someone else started. My phone buzzed. A message from Blake. Great work staying composed. Next move, address his collapse. Yes, Raphael, the board review. The misconduct reports, the business freeze, the fallout still warming in the oven. Justice takes time, but its aroma arrives early. That evening, I stopped by the market on my way home. Picked up groceries, apples, pasta, a loaf of fresh bread still warm. People glanced at me. Some offered soft looks of support. Others avoided eye contact like they didn't know which side they should be on. Small towns are just theaters with multiple intermissions. Back home, I boiled pasta and turned on soft music. My hands moved calmly, chopping tomatoes for sauce. While in my mind, I replayed the judge's words. Granted. Ordered. Sanctions. Disclosure. Words sharper than knives. As dinner simmered, I sat at the table and breathed slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The breath didn't feel forced. It felt earned. Tonight there would be no screaming, no confrontation, no begging. only progress. Before bed, I stood by the window again, looking at the quiet street under the soft hum of streetlights. I whispered to the glass, tomorrow he faces his own spotlight. Day 3 ended, not with applause, with authority. I woke up before sunrise, not because anxiety shook me awake, but because purpose did. When your life stops spinning, everything becomes quieter, and you hear yourself again. Today wasn't about Elena. Today was about him. Revenge isn't a single strike, it's a sequence. Yesterday the court had clipped her wings. Today, we would trim the guru's feathers until he couldn't fly anywhere near someone else's marriage again. The coffee tasted even stronger. Victory gives good beans better flavor. After a shower, I dressed for school. Crisp shirt, pressed slacks, jacket ironed smooth. A teacher who had done his homework. Before I left, my phone pinged, a message from Blake. Board received complaints, meeting with Raphael today at 11 a.m. If you want to observe, I'll have you in the waiting area. Observe. The sweetest, silent revenge. I responded, I'll be there. I set the phone down and breathed in, deeply, the kind of breath yoga instructors pretend they invented. School passed like a movie in the background, kids learning metaphors, me studying the faces of those who still believed tomorrow was guaranteed. My heart wasn't here today, but my discipline was. During third period, my phone buzzed again, unknown number. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Elena? I asked. No, a woman's voice said quickly. This is Jessica. I was one of Raphael's private clients. The voice trembled. Fear layered under guilt. How did you get my number? I asked gently. I saw your name on the court filing, and I recognized your wife. I hoped maybe you could help me too. He didn't just manipulate her. There was a sadness in her silence that told me this ran deeper than my own wound. What do you need? I asked. To make sure he can't do this to anyone again, she whispered, as though Raphael might hear from a mile away. I looked down the hallway, students laughing in the distance, backpacks bouncing, innocents unharmed by adult mistakes. You're helping, I told her. Everything you're saying matters. I'll testify, she said, whatever it takes. A new witness, fresh bricks in the wall closing around him. Thank you, Jessica, I said. You're not alone. When I returned to class, I wrote one sentence on the board. Some stories are warnings, others are instructions. My students wrote it down without question, as if they understood. At 10:45, I signed out from the office. Everything okay? Emily asked. Everything's becoming okay, I answered. The Yoga Federation building was a clean white box pretending to be peaceful. Succulents on every windowsill, posters with phrases like, balance begins within and breathe into your freedom. I sat in a waiting area beside Blake. He glanced at me over the folder in his lap. This is one of those steps that hurts them more than anything, he murmured. People like Raphael live on reputation. And retreat sign-ups, I added. He smiled. The calm, sharpened smile of a lawyer who liked when plans worked. A door opened. Raphael stepped out with his lawyer in tow. He didn't look like a spiritual leader anymore. He looked like a man whose poses had lost stability, no confidence in his shoulders, no control in his breath, just sweat under a shirt that once screamed perfection. His eyes found mine, shock, anger, fear, all flickered like a candle hit by too much wind. What are you doing here? He spat. I'm watching, I said. Not interfering, just observing the consequences. He took a step closer, too close, and whispered through clenched teeth. You think they'll strip my license over a stupid fling? A fling? I echoed. You preyed on clients. You crossed ethical boundaries professionally and personally. He scoffed. She wanted me. You both wanted each other, I agreed. But you were in a position of power. Boards hate when their instructors confuse therapy with intimacy. His lawyer grabbed his arm. Don't speak to him. Raphael jerked away, ego bruised and bleeding. "This isn't over," he threatened. I leaned in, not enough to escalate, but enough that he heard the exact tone of finality in my voice. "People like you don't believe it's over until the moment the world stops clapping," I said. "Listen carefully. The applause already died." A board member poked his head out. "Mr. Cruz, we need you back inside." He hesitated, looking at me one more time, like I had turned his world into a cracked mirror. Then he walked back, shoulders heavy. Blake nudged me. "Perfect delivery." "I didn't have to raise my voice," I replied. "That's why it worked," he said. We left them to their uncomfortable enlightenment. The rest of the day moved like a slow wave toward dusk. After school, I dropped by the grocery store again. Food calms chaos. A familiar voice called out behind me. "Aaron?" I turned. Jessica, the woman from the phone call. Her hands clutched the strap of her purse like she feared the strap might turn into a snake and betray her too. "You talked to the board?" she asked. "Not directly," I said, "but they know there's more than one victim now." She nodded. "He told me I was special. He told me I was broken. He told me he was the only one who could fix me." Her voice cracked. Her eyes dropped. "That's what predators do," I said gently. "They break you so they can take credit for putting you back together." She sniffed. "I feel stupid." "You feel human," I corrected. "Stupid is what he'll feel when lawyers and boards finish with him." Jessica gave a small, fragile smile. "You're very calm," she said. "I wanted to be angry," I admitted. "But calm builds better revenge." She laughed once, small, surprised. "Yeah, I guess it does." She thanked me again, then left, walking with shoulders just a bit lighter. Some people hold guilt for sins that weren't theirs. I wasn't letting Raphael write that script again. When I got home, dusk painted the street violet. I sat at the kitchen table, dinner warming my hands again, soup this time. I kept one ear tuned to the phone. At 7:21 p.m., it finally buzzed. Blake. Board suspended Raphael effective immediately. Full investigation underway. He can't teach. Anywhere. For now. I stared at the message, letting each sentence land like a stone on still water. Suspended. Unable to exploit anyone else. Unable to hide behind incense and stretchy pants. The curtain was closing. I typed one reply. "Good. Tomorrow. Elena." Blake wrote back. "Tomorrow. Depositions. She'll have to answer under oath." Depositions. Where lies come to die. Later that night, I cleaned the kitchen, wiping the counter slow, letting the rhythm settle my mind. Revenge literature often talks about fire, chaos, broken glass, and shouting. Mine used courtrooms, boards, and paperwork. Still sharp, still cutting, more effective. I stepped outside for air. The sky was full of stars, hundreds of tiny witnesses. Porch lights flickered along the street like a line of quiet guardians. I whispered into the night, "Actions have consequences, and so does silence." Behind me, the door clicked softly. No drama, no slamming. Just certainty. Day 3 ended with a different kind of peace. Not the peace of ignorance, the peace of order. Tomorrow was waiting. Tomorrow held answers she had been avoiding. And tomorrow, she would discover that divorce isn't the worst part. Truth is. The next morning, the sky wore a layer of dull silver cloud. The kind that turns daylight into something that feels unfinished. I woke before my alarm, not from dread but certainty. There's a small shift inside you when you are no longer running from pain, but walking toward justice. Every muscle seemed aware of its job. I showered slowly, letting the hot water wash off yesterday's tension. The mirror showed a face that wasn't broken. It was sharpened. My clothes were simple. A fitted shirt, charcoal jacket, nothing dramatic, but everything intentional. Today wasn't for revenge. Today was for the record. The drive to the attorney's office felt shorter than usual, perhaps because I no longer feared what would happen next. Fear belongs to people who are unprepared. I was prepared. The legal building looked ordinary. Red brick, clean windows, a small sign with black lettering, Ramsey and Boyd Deposition Suites. The kind of place where truth sits on conference tables while lies try to make themselves small. Blake was already there, standing outside with 2 cups of coffee. "You slept?" he asked, handing me one. "Like a man who stopped living in someone else's illusion," I replied. He smirked. "Good. Calm equals credible. Remember that." We entered one of the conference rooms. Long cherrywood table, water pitchers, pens lined up like soldiers ready for battle. A court reporter adjusted her transcription machine with quiet precision. She didn't look at anyone. She just waited, fingers poised in stillness. At 9:02 a.m., the door opened. Elena walked in with her lawyer, Silas. She looked smaller. Her glow was gone. Her steps were hesitant, not the rehearsed walk she used in yoga studios where the floor adored her. Her sweater was oversized, like she wanted fabric to be a shield. She avoided my eyes until she couldn't anymore. When she saw me, her lips parted. Not to speak, but because shock does that when expectations die. We took seats on opposite sides of the table. A recorder began, capturing breaths as evidence. The court reporter cleared her throat. "We are now on the record." Blake opened his folder. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, "we'll start with some basic questions. Please remember you are under oath. Lying today is not simply dishonest, it is illegal." Her swallow was audible. Blake slid the first document toward her, a bank statement. "Can you confirm that these charges labeled Private Session, RC, were authorized by you?" Her fingers trembled slightly as she scanned the page. "Yes." "And did you inform my client," Blake continued, each word clean and intentional, "that you were transferring joint marital funds to Mr. Cruz for these sessions?" "No," she breathed. "Why not?" She blinked repeatedly, panic fluttering behind her eyes. Because I didn't want him to get the wrong idea." "And what idea would that have been?" Blake asked. Her voice cracked. "That something was happening." Blake nodded. Nothing showy, just acknowledgement. "So something was happening?" he asked. Silas attempted to object. "Irrelevant unless—" The judge's voice rang through the speakerphone, strong and tired. "Overruled. She will answer." Elena's shoulders sank. "Yes." That one word, tiny but world-ending, finally landed where it belonged. Blake continued. "And during these retreats," he said, sliding the hotel invoice forward, "was Mr. Cruz the only other person staying with you?" Her answer escaped like regret leaving lungs. "Yes." "And were you intimate with him?" Her breath hitched, and with a breaking voice. "Yes." Silas placed a hand on her arm, a hand that probably wanted to escape but was paid not to. Blake didn't grin, didn't savor the victory. He simply moved to the next page. "Mrs. Thompson, did you ever intend to repay the marital funds spent on this affair?" Elena wiped a tear. "I didn't think about that." "That is the problem," Blake said softly. "You didn't think about a lot of things." She lowered her face. Her tears weren't dramatic anymore. They were real. But real tears still don't erase real actions. Blake closed his folder. "No further questions at this time." Silas asked for a brief recess, a break to patch holes that couldn't be patched. As we gathered our papers, Elena stood too fast. Her chair scraped loudly, an ugly noise in a quiet room. She hurried out into the hallway like she needed air that wasn't legally binding. I followed a moment later, for water, not comfort. But she found me first. "Aaron," she said, breath shaky, eyes red. "Please stop this. We can fix it. We can survive this." Her hands reached out, grasping for the past. I stepped back, gentle but final. "We can't fix what you burned on purpose," I said. I still love you, she insisted, stepping closer again. You know that, right? No, I corrected. I know you love attention, especially when it centers you. Her tears fell with less beauty now, raw, unfiltered. I felt dead before, she admitted. I needed to feel alive. So you killed us instead? I asked softly. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean to destroy everything. You didn't think I'd notice, Elena. She shook her head. I didn't think you cared enough to fight. And there it was, the deepest wound, the reason I was here. You thought indifference was my weakness, I said. It turned out to be your miscalculation. Her breathing lost rhythm. You're supposed to forgive me, she said. You're supposed to try. No, I said, steady and absolute. I did try, every day. You stopped trying long before I stopped caring, and now, forgiveness isn't owed. It's earned. She pressed her hand over her mouth, a sob escaping through fingers that once wore honesty like jewelry. Just then, Blake reappeared. We're needed back inside. Elena stared at me with a look I didn't recognize, fear mixed with unwilling respect. You weren't supposed to become this man, she whispered. I always was this man, I replied. You just never bothered to look closely. Back in the conference room, the judge issued rulings from the speaker, his voice a stamp. Temporary financial protections remain. Mrs. Thompson is required to provide full financial documentation within 7 days, Silas argued. The judge ignored the noise. And given the involvement of a third party, Mrs. Thompson is instructed to have no contact with Mr. Cruz regarding this case. Elena slumped. Law is a weight no yoga pose can lift. We will reconvene, the judge concluded. Court stands in recess. The recorder clicked off. Truth was stored safely. Blake and I stepped outside into fresh air that somehow felt earned. A breeze wrapped around me, crisp, new, as if nature signed off on closure. Blake shook my hand. You handled that like a professional. I am, I said. I just wasn't treated like one at home. He smiled once. Get rest. Tomorrow we file for fault-based division. She'll feel that. I nodded. We parted ways. I drove home slowly, letting the town pass in soft focus outside my window. Storefronts I'd known for years, neighbors walking dogs, kids kicking soccer balls, all unaware of the quiet war that had already declared a winner. Inside my house, dinner was simple, grilled chicken, rice, and vegetables. Stability tastes better than drama. After eating, I set my wedding ring on the table. It lay there, catching the kitchen light in a cold glint. One small circle, so much history trapped in metal. I picked it up, turned it once, set it down again. Not angrily, not dramatically, just done. Later, on the porch, the night air settled over me like comfort made tangible. Streetlights glowed. A dog barked in the distance. Inside my pocket, my phone buzzed. A message from Blake. Great job today. Tomorrow, asset division. She won't like the math. I typed, see you at 10. Then I whispered into the quiet. Day 4, completed. Tomorrow, her reality changes. Justice didn't roar. It arrived one ruling at a time, and I slept without waking once. By the next morning, the news had spread like perfume in a crowded elevator. Not the dramatic headlines of a big city, just the steady hum of a small town learning a secret and testing the taste of it in casual conversation. People didn't point directly. They looked longer, and longer looks reveal everything. I parked at school just as the first bus arrived. Kids spilled out with backpacks bouncing, none of them aware that marriages could become courtroom exhibits. That innocence made the world feel forgivable again. I walked into the teacher's lounge for coffee. Mrs. Gentry from 3rd grade paused mid-stir and gave me a look, not pity, not gossip, something more respectful. I heard you've been going through a hard time, she murmured, and handling it impressively. I nodded once. I teach literature. I let the plot speak. She smiled with quiet admiration. Whatever you're doing, you're showing a lot of strength. Strength. Funny how people only notice it once you stop performing weakness. In class, I taught a lesson about foreshadowing. It's when the story warns you, I explained to the students. When something small hints at a much bigger event later on. One student raised his hand. Like when someone buys flowers but you see a receipt for chocolates too? The class erupted in laughter. I smiled. Exactly like that. Their laughter was medicine, the kind insurance never covers. At lunch, my phone buzzed, a number I recognized but hoped would disappear. Raphael. He must have dialed the number 10 times before I finally answered. What do you want? I asked, voice firm, not unkind. You're destroying my life, he snapped. They suspended me. My clients are canceling. Megan kicked me off the schedule. So, I replied, natural consequences. It was just a mistake, he argued. People cheat. Why do you care so much? I almost laughed. His worldview was a yoga mat. Padded, narrow, and slippery. You crossed a professional boundary. You used influence to manipulate clients. You violated trust. You don't get it, he hissed. This is what people come to me for. Transformation. No, I corrected him. They come to you for help. You gave them harm wrapped in incense. Silence, the kind that confirms a hit landed. Then he tried one last tactic. You're doing this because you know she loved me more. I exhaled, slow, controlled, a teacher correcting a wrong answer. She loved the attention you gave her, I said. Not you. And the moment that attention becomes inconvenient, she'll drop you too. I heard his breathing shift, fear creeping in. Aaron, he whispered, please, can we resolve this? Quietly? You made it public first, I reminded him. I'm just returning the spotlight. I ended the call. Revenge doesn't always need volume, just precision. After school, I stopped at the grocery store again. Routines matter. The familiar tames the unexpected. Near the fruit section, I saw Emily, my co-teacher, comparing oranges, her lips pursed in serious citrus analysis. How are you? She asked, stepping closer. Learning what boundaries taste like, I replied. And? She raised an eyebrow. Better than resentment, I said. She nodded slowly, then asked in her gentle, straightforward tone, do you want company some evening? Dinner? A movie? Something not about all this? There was no flirtation in her eyes. Just kindness. Real connection. The type built on mutual respect, not stolen excitement. Someday, I said sincerely, when the dust settles. She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't take what isn't offered. I'll hold you to that. When I got home, the sun was brushing the rooftops with soft gold, turning the street into warm nostalgia. I found a delivery envelope resting by my door. The official stamped papers from the court confirming financial protections. I carried them inside like a trophy made of facts. But before I could put them down, my phone rang again. Blocked caller. I hesitated, then answered. Aaron? Elena's voice, raw and tired. Yes, I said. I'm not okay, she confessed. Everyone knows. People are looking at me like I'm a stranger, like I'm poison. Actions rewriting reputations. Cause meets effect. You did a big thing, I replied. People have big reactions. I feel like I'm drowning, she whispered. You jumped into the water, I responded. A quiet sob slipped through the line. Then, the truth she tried so hard to avoid. I didn't think you'd fight. You always seemed so soft. I was soft, I said. But softness isn't weakness. It's a choice. The mistake was thinking I couldn't choose differently. Silence stretched, awkward, honest. Then she asked the most predictable question. Do you still love me? Ah, the question ego asks when power fades. I didn't rush my answer. I love the version of you who existed before the lies, I said. Before the ego. Before the audience. I let that settle. But I can't love the person who replaced her. A shaky exhale on her end. Is there any way back? She asked. No, I answered, firm, final. But there is a way forward, she sniffed. What way? Separate. Another sob, deeper, heavier. She hung up. I didn't celebrate. Some endings are necessary, not triumphant. Later that night, I opened my laptop. Blake had sent a new document. Fault-based division motion drafted. Submitting tomorrow. She will owe you. Divorce law is poetry written in percentages. Her choices were about to cost her mathematically. I reread the motion carefully. Her affair documented financial misconduct, itemized spousal support, recalculated in my favor. Legal justice is a slow burn, but it warms the right places. I stepped out onto the porch again. The moon was clean and bright above the rooftops. A silver coin flipped by the universe. Somewhere across town, Raphael was pacing a small apartment, imagining his future shrinking. Somewhere else, Elena was crying to a friend, realizing audience applause isn't love. Meanwhile, I stood in quiet air, feeling something profound. I didn't want them hurt. I wanted them real. And truth did the hurting on its own. Revenge had become something lighter. Not punishment. Correction. I whispered into the night. Day 5, still standing. The porch light flickered gently, as if agreeing. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt peace settle into the corners of my heart, like furniture finally placed in the right room. Tomorrow, the story would continue. But tonight I existed without needing anyone to watch me breathe. That was enough. It was Saturday morning when the next wave hit. Weekends always made the house feel louder, like the rooms remembered laughter, footsteps, shared coffee. But today, the silence was loyal to me alone. I sat at the small dining table, marking student essays with a red pen as sunlight spilled softly across the paper. There was something healing in the normalness of grading work. Kids wrote about heroes in their stories, some brave, some foolish, some both. Funny how often bravery is just clarity with timing. Around 9:18 a.m., I heard a knock. Not loud, not frantic, hesitant. A knock that asked permission to exist. Through the peephole, I saw Elena. She looked unstyled. No perfect makeup, no yoga glow. Just a woman whose reflection had finally stopped lying to her. She held a paper bag, maybe the peace offering she once used to win small arguments. I opened the door halfway, not an invitation, a boundary. What do you want, Elena? She forced a soft smile, holding up the bag. Your favorite, cinnamon rolls, from Maple Street Bakery. You used to... I know what I used to like, I cut in. That version of me isn't standing here anymore. Her hand shook slightly as she lowered the bag. I was hoping maybe we could talk. No, I said plainly. Her eyes shimmered, tears always waiting backstage. I'm not here to fight, she insisted. I'm here to explain. You already explained, I replied, under oath. Her breath caught like I'd punched the air out of her lungs. She looked down at the bag as if hoping it could rewrite the moment. Can we go inside? She asked quietly. Just to sit? No, I repeated, calm, unmoving. There's no conversation that doesn't involve lawyers anymore. She looked up, wounded, desperate. I miss you. You miss having an audience, I corrected. She flinched. Truth is cruel, even whispered. You think this is easy for me? she said, voice trembling. Everyone's talking. My friends, if they're even still my friends, keep asking questions. I go to the studio and they look at me like I'm contagious, like I'm some kind of villain, I finished. Actions create roles, Elena. You picked yours. Her breathing fractured again. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did, I said. Repeatedly. And you celebrated it while I watched. Tears finally broke free, raw and unscripted. I'm sorry, she whispered. I nodded. Good. Keep that. She swallowed hard. Do you still believe in us? Even a little? I held her gaze without blinking. I believe in me, I said, for the first time in a long time. And that was the moment she knew the door she destroyed wasn't going to open again. Not with cinnamon rolls, not with tears, not with old promises. She wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. The bag crinkled as she tightened her grip. I'll go, she whispered. You already left, I said quietly. She stepped backward down the porch. Before turning away, she looked at the bag one last time, then set it gently on the railing like she couldn't walk away entirely empty-handed. Then she left. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner before I picked up the bag, placed it directly into the trash bin. Not out of anger, out of completion. I returned to my essays, red pen resuming its dance. But only 3 papers in, the doorbell rang again, twice in quick succession. Annoyed, I walked to the door, expecting another emotional rehearsal. It wasn't Elena. A certified mail carrier stood there holding a clipboard. Delivery for Aaron Thompson? Right here. She handed over a thick envelope stamped with an official seal, National Yoga Accreditation and Ethics Board. I thanked her and closed the door. Inside, I set the envelope on the table, smoothing the corners with my palm. My heart didn't race. It observed. I opened it carefully. Inside, a notification, a formal letter, a list of pending allegations, and a temporary revocation order. Rafael Cruz was officially barred from teaching anywhere in the state until a full review. There was also a carbon copy addressed to Spirit Pulse Yoga and one to Rafael himself. Attached, a statement requesting additional testimony from affected spouses, including me if needed. The consequences were no longer hypothetical. They were printed, stamped, and processed. My phone buzzed. Blake. He was served. I'm guessing the panic call is coming. I didn't have to wait long. The phone rang again. Rafael. I let it ring once for every private session he pretended was spiritual realignment. Then answered. His voice exploded through the speaker. What did you do? I kept my tone measured. I didn't do anything you didn't initiate. They're saying I violated ethics, that I manipulated clients, that I exploited your wife. Did you? I asked. That's not the point, he shouted. That's exactly the point, I corrected. I'm losing everything. His voice cracked. Panic had replaced ego. My livelihood depends on this. So did my marriage, I said. Funny how that works. He was breathing hard now, rage mixed with regret. You're enjoying this, he accused. No, I said. I'm just not apologizing for it. Silence, sharp and cold. Then, almost a whisper. She said she loved me. And I'm sure she did, I replied. The same way she loved me, right until someone shinier walked by. Quiet again. He hadn't expected logic to hurt more than yelling. You don't get to take my life away, he said, voice fragile now. I'm not taking anything, I said softly. You gambled. You lost. I just kept the receipts. He hung up, or the universe did it for him. I exhaled, slow and even, letting the pieces of justice click together. Not revenge, accountability, there's a difference. At sunset, the neighborhood kids were still riding bikes outside, wheels hitting uneven pavement with noisy joy. I stepped out onto the porch, leaning against the railing. The discarded bag of cinnamon rolls still sat in the trash, a symbol of a past packaged in sugar and lies. Emily drove past, window down. She waved, friendly and warm. I returned the gesture with a small nod. Good things don't disappear. They wait for room. Inside, I cooked dinner. Chicken, roasted vegetables, a simple salad. I ate slowly, savoring the ordinary. Peace is delicious when you've earned the recipe. My phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Raphael. It was Blake. Tomorrow, property division meeting. We finalized the math. The math. Where heartbreak becomes spreadsheets, where betrayal earns a price tag. I replied, I'll be ready. I set down my phone and looked around my quiet house. Not empty, just free. The walls didn't echo anymore. They breathed with me. I whispered into the still air. Day 6. They feel the consequences. Tomorrow, they face the cost. I turned off the lights. Darkness wasn't frightening anymore. It was restful. I slept like a man who no longer needed to imagine justice. I was living it. Monday morning arrived with a confidence I could feel in my spine. The sky was clear, washed clean by last night's rain. The world looked refreshed, the way you feel after you finally stop apologizing for someone else's selfishness. Coffee. Pressed shirt. Organized folder of documents. My armor was ordinary, but powerful. The financial settlement conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. location, Mahoney and Blake law offices. The same place Truth had already adjusted Elena's posture. On the drive there, I kept one window slightly cracked. The breeze felt like a reminder. You're not surviving anymore. You're negotiating from strength. When I arrived, Blake was waiting beside the conference table, suit immaculate, glasses perched like punctuation. He smiled when he saw me. Ready for round 2? He asked. I'm still calm, I said. That's readiness. He nodded, impressed. Calm is terrifying to a guilty person. Elena entered 10 minutes late, just long enough to pretend she had control. Her lawyer, Silas, followed closely. Elena's eyes were swollen from tears she probably spent all night manufacturing. She took the seat across from me, not next to me, across. Where consequences belong. Her nails tapped nervously against the table. She looked at the paperwork in front of her like it was written in a language she never bothered to learn. The meeting began. Blake slid spreadsheets, statements, and charts across the table, each page a silent microphone amplifying her mistakes. As of this date, Blake announced, we show $1,400 withdrawn from the joint account over the past 8 months, funding private sessions, hotel charges, and related expenses with Mr. Cruz. Elena winced, like the number slapped her. Silas tried to object. That amount is exaggerated. Blake ignored him and continued. He was a surgeon. Interruptions were just background noise. These funds were used without my client's consent, and for the sole purpose of maintaining an extramarital relationship, he said. Therefore, Mr. Thompson seeks full reimbursement and adjustment of asset division based on fault. Silas attempted a weak defense. My client is employed full-time and contributed to the marriage. At that, Blake calmly slid another sheet forward. Pay stubs, tax filings, household expense logs. She contributed approximately 18% of the household income, Blake said. Mr. Thompson contributed the remaining 82% and financed all major purchases, including the home and both vehicles. Elena's mouth tightened. No room for denial. Therefore, Blake concluded, she is financially responsible for her choices. The judge wasn't there, but the law was. And the law listened through paperwork. Elena finally tried to speak. Her voice shook as she aimed the blame gun. You're going to leave me with nothing, she burst out, tears threatening again. How could you try to ruin me like this? I met her eyes. I never raised my voice. You ruined yourself, I said. I just stopped paying for it. She sobbed, but the room stayed still. Silas moved closer to her and whispered fiercely, "You need to stay composed." The irony was delicious. Blake continued smoothly. "Given the misconduct, we propose Mr. Thompson keeps the house entirely. Mrs. Thompson forfeits entitlement to spousal support and remains responsible for marital waste repayments." Translation: I keep home. She gets zero support. She pays back every cent she spent cheating. Elena's chair squeaked as she lunged forward, eyes blazing. "I refuse! I gave years to this marriage, years of supporting you!" I leaned back, hands folded, expression even. "You supported me?" I asked quietly. "You mean the nights I graded papers until 2 a.m., while you had early yoga? Or the weekends you vanished to find clarity? Or the months you spent loving applause more than vows?" She choked on the truth. "You can't take everything," she cried. "I'm not," I said. "I'm only taking back what was mine alone." Her chest rose and fell like the room's air had turned to fire. Then Blake delivered the final blow. "We will also retain the right to seize profits earned from any wellness brand Mrs. Thompson has developed with Mr. Cruz, including promotional content or influencer deals." Elena froze. Her lips parted slowly. That was the first time she realized everything she hoped to gain with Raphael was also slipping away. "You can't do that," she whispered. "Legally," Blake said, adjusting his glasses, "we can. And yes, we will." Her tears finally spilled, full surrender. The meeting paused. We stepped out into the hallway while Silas attempted to hold Elena together piece by piece. Blake turned to me. "Aaron, we're winning, but remember, she'll try one last angle. Manipulation doesn't die quietly." I nodded. "I'm not opening doors." He smiled. "Good. Let the process do the talking." Out in the lobby, I waited by the window. Cars passed, people walked dogs, the world kept spinning, and I stood still, but not stuck. 5 minutes later, Elena stepped out of the conference room, alone. Silas stayed behind to review the terms. Her makeup was smudged. Honesty stains more than mascara. She walked toward me slowly, like the air weighed too much. "Aaron," she whispered, Can I hug you? Just once, please?" The request twisted something quietly inside me. Not longing, not love, memory. But memories aren't contracts. "No," I said gently. Her chin quivered. "I'm scared of what comes next." I nodded. "Then change what comes next, but not with me." The wind outside pressed softly against the windows, like the world wanted to witness closure. "I didn't want this to be forever," she said, referring to the fight, not the betrayal. "You should have thought of forever earlier," I replied. She looked down, voice small. "Do you hate me?" "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't trust you." That hurt her more than any insult could, because trust is harder to lose than love, and impossible to get back. Silas re-emerged, briefcase closed, pride cracked. "We'll review and respond," he said. "You do that," Blake replied. We shook hands, formal endings for personal devastation. Elena walked past me toward the exit, slow and fragile, like her bones had forgotten how to hold her up without lies. When the door closed behind her, I finally allowed myself one long breath, not relief, recognition. I was finally living in reality instead of her excuses. Later that evening, I heated leftover pasta, sprinkled fresh cheese, and sat by the window. Lights flickered on across the neighborhood, lives inside houses that weren't collapsing. My phone buzzed. Blake. "Great job today. Document signed." We moved forward. I wrote back. "Thank you. Day 7 complete." I set the phone aside and looked at my living room, a place no longer haunted by betrayal. I whispered more to myself than the night. Tomorrow isn't hers anymore. I closed the curtains and let the darkness in, this time without fear. Because the truth was finally brighter than the pain.